So it looks like we're going. I'm just going to do a quick check to confirm that. Because internet issues. Okay, good. Yeah. All right. So sorry everyone for the delay. Literally my internet died like the minute Trent logged on, and that caused all kinds of insanity. So we're going to go ahead and get started since we're running a little bit late. Okay. One. Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. My name is Andrew Dennison. I'm going to be kind of running things tonight. Joe Salin is out on doing some vacation stuff in eastern Iowa. Doesn't really have good internet access. And TC started his awesome new job and is hip deep in all of that. So it'll just be me and Trent tonight. We appreciate all of you tuning in live, as well as people who are listening after. All right, so just a few plugs to get out of the way first. Just kind of give a shout out to our cardboard cohorts, the Bridge City Board Gamers. Tune into their podcast as well, as they discuss different games, usually from what we're playing, so they make for a pretty good listen on that as well. Also, check out Punchboard Media, where you can see all kinds of board game content, both from us and fellow podcasters, bloggers, audio, video, whatever. They got something for everyone. So go ahead and check that out as well. So tonight we're going to start out by reviewing a couple games quickly. Then we'll be talking about Gencon, more particularly what is Trent looking forward to, because I am not going this year. But we'll talk about some games that we're looking forward to that come out maybe around that time, either at Gen Con or through other means, but are roughly of the same time frame. So we'll go ahead and start off with reviews. Trent, since you'll be doing more talking, why don't you go ahead and take this one first, and then I'll follow up.
All right, so for the last 2 weeks, I've been on vacation, hiking in the national parks of Colorado, and my favorite national park was Mesa Verde, but this isn't a national parks review podcast. So anyway, I'm going to talk about the game that I played the most in the last couple weeks, which is turned into be our default vacation game, which is Unlock. The Unlock series is a series of escape room games published by Space Cowboys. Essentially what they are is you got this deck of cards that have numbers on the back of them, and on the other side there are pictures or other pieces of text or various things, and you essentially move through the deck and figure out what's going on in each card, and then once you figure out what's going on and solve various puzzles, it'll tell you to go to another specific card in the deck. You flip that over, it adds to the puzzle, helps you figure out other puzzles that you have from earlier cards and so on. It's essentially one of those escape room in a box style games. And I'm going to just discuss these in general as a group because I've played several of them in the last couple weeks. And what I want to say is it's really hard to say this is my take on the Unlock games, because some of them are really good and some of them are really bad. Some of them are really easy and some of them are really hard. And there's no connection between good, bad, easy, hard at all. There are good hard ones and bad hard ones and good easy ones and bad easy ones. They seem to just be all over the place, and I feel like these are submitted by different design teams. Like different design and development groups have developed different games. And some of them, I don't know whether there's a cultural barrier or something going on, but some of them are almost inscrutable. You don't really understand what's going on. And some of them are just completely just this makes complete sense. It flows together great. Boom, 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 boom. And it feels like such a mixed bag. And I find that really interesting because you'd think there would be a little bit more standardization to it. I've played a lot of the Exit the Game, for example. Those are the ones where you actually destroy the pieces in doing it. Those feel really consistent to me. I kind of know what I'm getting in the box with them. With the Unlock games, it's extremely variable. Some of them are really good. Some of them are really bad. Some don't even feel like they should be in the same game series other than using a few of the same mechanics. I will say that the one that my family enjoyed the most was actually a fairly easy one, and I'm trying to find the name of it as right at this moment. because there's about 20 of them, and I'm not sure which one the name is. I can picture the front of it, so I'm looking at the covers of a bunch to figure out which one it is that we really liked. It would be A No Side Story. That was the one that my family and I liked the best of the whole lot. It's actually really easy. It's not very complex, but the whole thing flowed well. The puzzles made sense, and it was really just a joy to play. On the other hand, we played the Wizard of Oz one, and that one was a train wreck. For a bad example, it was extremely difficult, and the puzzles often didn't make any sense. At a couple points, we just guessed, and we actually guessed right. But it didn't feel like we knew what was going on. We just guessed. And that didn't feel like you had done anything other than just like saying, oh, let's flip over card 82 and see what's on the other side. So I guess with this series, if you like the idea of an escape room in a box, there are definitely good ones in the series. But I would strongly encourage you to go and look at them yourself and look at the individual reviews of them. And as I'm looking through this list on BGG, I noticed that the average scores on these range anywhere from the mid-6s to the upper 8s. And that doesn't surprise me in the least, because this series feels really, really uneven. So I guess this is simultaneously a good review and a bad review. And that there are some of these that are really good and entertaining for a family, and there's some of these I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. And to conclude, don't buy the Wizard of Oz one. That's my review of the Unlocked games.
Yeah. I think my family's been playing the Escape the Crate ones most of the time, and like those have felt pretty consistent to me. I think the only one, I don't know which one I played, but yeah, every now and again you get one where you end up looking at a hint and you're just like, how would I ever even have thought to think that? But for the most part, they run pretty consistently. And then other than our last one, we like just decimated it. Like normally we have to kind of struggle through them a bit and use a hint here or there. And like the last one, we just slammed through with no trouble. And we were just like, we didn't get markedly better, I don't think.
Yeah, I looked at these. There are actually some that are below a 6, and then there's many that are like, there's some that are above an 8. So that should tell you the variability in the 1 to 10 rankings on Board Game Geek of this series.
Yeah.
And Wizard of Oz is definitely in the lower half, and it deserves to be. None of us liked it.
Yeah.
This is a mixed bag series. I think some of them are good, but if I was you, I'd go and look at specific titles and pick a few for you to look at. Like, I think that, like I said, the No Side Story is fun, but they're relatively easy. But some of the other ones, man, I can't recommend some of them.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's like with some of these, they have to kick them out so fast to keep the series relevant that maybe just something slip through that shouldn't have. I kind of wonder that sometimes.
Could be. I don't know. But it's a mixed bag. The ones that are good are actually good and worth playing. The ones that are not, don't. And I would encourage you to review the series and find ones for yourself. I would recommend No Side Story for a family. And that's about all I've got to really say about it.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about and review the game Heaven and Ale. And so this is a game I got to play last weekend a little bit. And what it kind of feels like to me is a cross between sort of Castles of Burgundy and Lignum, in that it's kind of got almost that playmat feel from Castles of Burgundy where you're putting down tiles and scoring things and, a little bit of combo-y stuff like that. But it's got the sort of path mechanism from Lignum. So you go around this path and you can go kind of as far as you want around the path. But once you've passed stuff, you can't then go back and collect it in the same round. So it kind of becomes a game of, do I want to hoover up everything that may or may not be critical, or do I want to jump ahead to those like critical things I really need? Then you put these tiles on the board and they score in some different ways. You get points. There's so many rounds to the game. And that's kind of my feel on it. Now, kind of, I guess the way I thought about this game is, like I said, kind of a cross between the playmat style of Castles of Burgundy, but instead of using dice to figure out what you can do, you use this path of tiles to figure out what you can do. Certain parts of the map trigger scoring based on the tiles you put down, and so on. I have to say, I think my feelings on the game by the end of it were this is a pretty kind of, I don't know, it's hard to tell with my tastes anymore, but I think I would put this into maybe a light medium game as far as weight goes. It feels kind of similar in difficulty to like Castles of Burgundy and games around that level. I will say, I think after at least a couple plays, I like this a little bit better than Castles of Burgundy. Castles of Burgundy is a great system all in all, but has the one issue of the more people you add, the longer the game just takes, to where if you play it with 4 people, it can be some pretty excruciating downtime to where people really don't want to mess with it. However, it felt like Heaven and Ale just keeps clocking along pretty good and just keeps speeding along. There's some different scaling the game does to make it a little bit more playable with other players. So overall, I guess my final thoughts on it, I think I liked it a little bit better than Castles of Burgundy. It's definitely a light to medium thing. But other than that, I think in some ways it kind of falls into that category of, it kind of feels like a game on a pile of games, at least for me. It doesn't stand out in any one way, shape, or form. It just feels kind of like a mishmash of other games, and it's fine. There's nothing that is wrong with it. There's just nothing for it that really stands out for me. So, I'd be happy to play it if someone wants to play it. It's probably not going to be a game I call for, though, and it's not going to be a game I spend much time hunting down. The only thing that was a little weird to me is when I looked at the initial price of this game, it was like $60, and it really doesn't seem like a $60 kind of game. I think I saw it on sale or price now on Amazon for $30. And that is a much more reasonable price. I think at that price, it might be worth picking up for people that like games kind of in that weight range that are a little puzzly but have a little tension to them. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on Heaven and Ale and what I thought about it. Trent, have you played that or have any thoughts on it?
I played it once, and rather than Castles of Burgundy, the way the board was reminded me more of Azul. I was feeling Azul when I played it more than Castles of Burgundy, but it felt like Azul with like a lignum track in the middle of the board instead of. That's kind of the way I felt about it when I was playing it. It felt more distant than from Castles of Burgundy than you described it.
Yeah,
but I understand what you mean by about the weight and by the fact that you're building kind of your own board. But like I said, I felt more Azul from it, so.
I could see that too, where you're going with it. Maybe it's just like the hexagon thing also kind of like brings up Castles of Burgundy to me as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a fine game. It's just, yeah, it just feels kind of like it doesn't stand out in any way particular to me compared to other games around that time. But yeah, if it sounds interesting, go check it out. See what you think about it. And it might be of interest to you. All right, so let's go ahead. We're going to talk tonight about Gencon in terms of games we're kind of interested in, as well as things Trent's kind of looking forward to as far as like the things he might be doing at Gencon or favorites or highlights for that. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to Trent first, and why don't we start with if there's anything you're looking forward to about Gen Con that's not just like a board game release, if you want to talk about that for a few minutes.
Okay. When I go to Gen Con, the big reason I started going to Gen Con and the big reason I still go to Gen Con is primarily because I have a number of people that I used to play role-playing games with, and they're kind of the people that got me into going to Gen Con, and they're the core part of the group that I go with. A lot of years I end up playing a few role-playing games with them and doing stuff that's not board game related with them. And I mean, this is true this year. This is probably the lowest turnout of that group of any year that I've had since I've started going, unfortunately. But I think next year will be a lot better. But next year I have a free pass to Gen Con because I got one of those nice shiny golden envelopes. Hooray me. So I get to go for free next year. So I know I'm going next year, pretty much no matter what life deals me, I'll probably get to go. So that's all good. The only really interesting or unusual role-playing game that I think I'm going to play this year at Gen Con is called Phoenix Dawn Command. And that is a game that's very much, it's kind of almost a mixture of a card game and a role-playing game. And part of the thematic interest of that game is that your character dies a lot, hence the name Phoenix. You keep coming back from the dead in various ways, and there's a lot of reincarnation theme about it. I've been really interested to try it for a while. I actually have a copy of it, but I haven't had an opportunity to group down to the table, and we're going to definitely play that at Gen Con. I'm looking forward to it. Most of the other stuff is pretty normal role-playing things. I think we are going to play some one-off storytelling, like fiasco type stuff on Wednesday. But for me, that's like half of Gen Con is role-playing stuff, and it's really not relevant to this podcast. So the other half is board games. What?
Are you doing any tournaments this year like you did that one year?
Not this year. I am not. I was really, really on the fence about doing a Legend of the Five Rings tournament. I decided not to, mostly because this year my wife is going. It's just me and my wife, and to do that tournament requires devoting a day to it, and that wasn't really going to fly real well. It wasn't something that, not going to work. I think those kind of tournaments work better in years when I'm going by myself. Or when I'm going with my oldest son, who would have also played in it with me. If he was going, we probably would have done it together. But if it's just me and my wife, she's more into playing either the one-off storytelling RPGs or board games, rather than like the 10-hour tournament of an LCG. Not really her thing. So it's because of that I skipped out on the tournaments. I was really tempted to play in the L5R one, though.
Yeah, I see where you're going there. Plus, like, if you have a group at a tournament, it can be an issue. Like, if one person falls out early and then everybody else keeps going, it's like, well, what do they do while you're finishing off the tournament? And yeah, I could see that.
Last year, my son and I played in the Legend of the Five Rings tournament, L5R, and we both did fairly well. We played for a long time in it, both of us. We both ended up deciding it was time to drop during the same round, and I didn't drop because of him. We both reached a point where it was like, we're not going to do any better. We're not going to make it to the next cut, so we're just going to drop now and get our prizes. And so that's what we did.
Yeah. Have more fun doing something else that, will go somewhere. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think that probably sums up Gen Con pretty well. There's usually something for everyone there.
If you can't find something to do at Gen Con, I'm not going to say it's going to be a great time for everybody. What I'm saying is if you can't find something to entertain yourself at Gen Con, gaming is probably not your hobby.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something somewhere for somebody if you're into gaming at all.
Yeah. Even because I was, somewhat into like the more heavy and quirky games at that time. And usually like there was a lot of things I could get involved in. Plus, if you want to explore, there's a lot of things you can do there.
A lot of times the only problem is like a needle in a haystack problem.
Yeah.
There's so much going on to find the thing that you're really into can sometimes be a little difficult, but it's probably there. You just got to find it.
Yeah. The one thing that looks good for this year, I think, compared to the year I went is this year it seemed like there was more games being released for like heavy economic Euro gamers than there's been in a lot of previous years. Like usually I look at a Gen Con preview list. I'm just like, nope. And there's like virtually nothing I'm interested in. And I actually pulled up, probably somewhere between 6 and 10 things that were like, yeah, that actually looks interesting and not something I would expect to actually see at Gen Con. So it looks like there might be a little bit of a heavier quirky game presence there than previous years, which might be cool to check out if you're into that kind of stuff. But I'm not attending, so I will wait and see those when they're out and available, or Trent buys them. So
I have a. The nice thing is my birthday is very close to Gen Con, and my wife's usually like, get a couple games for your birthday. So that's often why I come home from Gen Con with a few games. Is she's like, it's your birthday, get yourself a couple games, whatever you seems cool to you. And so I usually take advantage of that and come home with a couple games. So I expect to.
Yeah, that's not a bad way to go. All right, so let's transition to talking about a few games that are of interest to us coming out at Gen Con or in that time frame, kind of July, August, kind of pre-Essen time frame. If there's games that aren't specifically listed at Gen Con, but they're coming out, and things we want to look at. So I got a few, Trent, that I'm interested in. There's probably some overlap on it.
I'm guessing there is.
Probably. So if we want, why don't we just kind of take turns going through it, and you do one and I'll do one, and then if you end up with more to talk about than I do, we'll just kind of keep going, and whenever you want to cut out there.
All right.
Why don't you go ahead and go first then, and then I'll go after that.
All right, I'm going to start off with the one I'm probably my number one game I'm most looking forward to, and I know it's the one that TC is most looking forward to, and that's Dune. Dune is a 1979 classic from Avalon Hill, based on the Frank Herbert mid-1960s classic sci-fi novel. It's been in Wright's Nightmare Vortex, I don't even know what, for like 20 or 30 years. Somehow Gale Force 9 pulled the right levers and got the rights to both the mechanics and the theme of the game, and is actually not quite directly reprinting it, but pretty close to it. It's not got exactly the same art as the old edition, but it's got art that seems very similar to a very popular print and play version of it, and it looks really beautiful. Dune is effectively it's an area control game, but the 6 players in the game have very, very asymmetric powers. This is kind of like the definitive asymmetric powers dudes on a map game, except the system is set up to emulate the world of Dune, so the game is very political. And the variable player powers in this are really weird and off the wall. And it's like the prototype of those kind of games. It's like the definitive baseline. It really is. And
it's by the same people who did Cosmic Encounter, right?
Yeah, but it's more of a like dudes on a map game than that is. It's really like it's an area control. I keep calling dudes on a map, but area control is probably a better description. It's an area control game. Basically, if you or the players you're in alliance with control a certain number of key spots on the map, you just win. That you're the winner. Except one of the factions can predict on which turn that is going to happen and which faction is going to win. And if they call that right, they're the winner instead. That's part of one of the fun things of the game. I'm just really looking forward to it. I have had the opportunity to play it in the past. It was a hoot because the player powers are so weird and varied. And like I said, Gale Force 9 is bringing this out. Rumored is that they're going to somehow they've gotten rights also to some of the player-made expansions for it, and that's going to be a future expansion for Dune, which I don't even know how that's going to work, but whatever. I assume if they figured out the rights to actually republish Dune, they probably figured out that too.
Yeah, there's not many harder rights to get a hold of.
Yeah, Gale Force 9 must have some good lawyers. That's all I got to say. I don't know how they managed to do it when Fantasy Flight Asmodee could not. So
yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, that's my number one most excited thing. That's a game I'm probably just gonna buy immediately when the dealer hall opens. As soon as I can get in there to the booth, I'm going to pick myself up a copy, and that's Dune.
Yeah, that one's gonna be like I imagine there's gonna be a charge for that one. Like
I maybe, but here's the thing I've noticed. This is the thing that makes me not really worry about getting a copy. Gale Force 9 brings like 50 jillion copies of whatever games they're bringing out to Gen Con.
Yeah.
They bring mountains and mountains and mountains of copies. Like, it's ridiculous. The year they brought out Star Wars Ascendancy, I couldn't even believe that they brought that many copies. Like, they must have brought literally more than 1,000 copies of that to Gen Con.
Jesus.
And I have a feeling that they're going to do something similar with Dune. They'll have a lot of copies there.
Yeah.
They have more of the philosophy of like, if you want to buy this game, we'll have it for you.
Instead
None
of
of this
the
like artificial scarcity stuff.
scarcity
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Gale Force 9 is more of the, if you want the copy, we'll have it here for you.
Yeah, it's not like the what was it, Seafall, when like it was sold out by the VIGs before the regular public even got a chance.
Yeah, and then those people thought, great, I paid $70 for a really questionable
Yeah.
legacy game.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, we'll not get on to Seafall, but yeah, the thing that makes me feel good about this is that Gale Force 9 is not in the past been a publisher that played the artificial scarcity game. They were a publisher that's like, I want to sell as many things on this dealer hall floor as possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they did it. So I'm not worried about rushing their booth or anything like that. Unless they've changed their strategy, I'm assuming I'll get a copy.
Right. Probably the game, I'll put this up, probably the game in some ways I'm most excited to see out, even though unfortunately due to monetary constraints, I couldn't back it on Kickstarter at the time, is City of the Big Shoulders. It's supposed to be for sale at Gen Con, and I know it's going to be fulfilled to Kickstarters here pretty soon as well. I've been pretty excited with this game. I was involved with some of the play testing with that and hyping it on our podcast, interviewing the designer, that kind of stuff. It's probably the best marriage of a resource conversion kind of Euro game with an 18xx style auction and companies game that has ever been done, period. Yeah, I know I've talked about Masters of Venice and it kind of feeling like that in some ways, but not really. Like, this is absolutely a good halfway point between a heavy economic Euro and an 18xx game you're ever gonna find. I know we were playing an early prototype and immediately very impressed by it and what it was seeking to do. And I think, or I hope this game's going to be a pretty big hit. And I hope it will bridge people into playing, 18xx games, that maybe they'll play this nice hybrid Euro one and they'll be like, oh, this stock and running companies thing's not as scary as I thought it would be. And maybe like, come over and play with the train gamers a little bit. But if you like train games and you have a lot of Eurogamer friends, I think this would be a good one to pick up. It'll give you kind of that 18xx feel a little bit, but the other half of, like I said, is a very resource conversion heavy economic Euro, and it does it all really, really well. I've played a very early stage prototype and I've played a pretty late stage prototype, which from what I hear, I think the new one we played recently, the full game is pretty darn close to that. Other than obviously way nicer components. But it's supposed to be there, as well as the expansion, which is kind of a lot of extra companies to just kind of make it more variable. Both of those will be for sale there. And I think based on what I'm seeing, that's going to be a game to check out if you like heavy economic Euros, or you like 18xx, or you kind of want a marriage between the two.
Cool. I'm also on board with that. I'm going to stop by their booth and check it out. Mm-hmm. I did kickstart it, so I don't have to worry about picking it up there. But
yeah.
I'll
be really interested to see how they do. I'm really hoping he does well with it. But I don't know. Gen Con's kind of not a usual convention for a game like that. So it'll be interesting.
Cool.
All right. What you got up next, Trent?
Okay, I'm going to talk about Western Empires. Western Empires is not actually going to be released at Gen Con. I believe it is an Essen release, but they're having like demos at their booth and also like game playthroughs as events. Western Empires is basically Civilization, the old Avalon Hill Civilization. It's a game for 5 to 9 players, and essentially, honestly, what it really is half of Mega Civilization. They literally took Mega Civilization, chopped the game into 2 parts, Eastern and Western Empires, and they're releasing this as the first volume is Eastern Empires, and they're releasing that now. And so you play with 5 to 9 players. It's extremely similar to the old Avalon Hill civilization game. It's a civilization game with a lot of like very direct player interaction and negotiation. Fairly simple tech tree. I mean, the rules aren't that simple. It basically paves the way for a lot of negotiation. I believe Andy played that at one point. Did you not? You played
Civilization?
Yeah.
No, I missed that day that everyone was doing that.
All right. So, I mean, like I said, it's very negotiation based. It does take a long time. The original Avalon Hill one only allowed from like 3 to 7 players. This is for 5 to 9 players. And then when Western Empires comes out in which is which. This is Western Empires. When Eastern Empires comes out in a year or two, then you'll be able to combine the two and essentially play Mega Civilization if you want. It'll also be 5 to 9 players, and you can combine them if you want to into a 10 to 18 player game.
Assuming you got 24 straight hours to play it in, but
essentially if you have both, it becomes Mega Civ.
Oh.
And if you have either one of them, it's essentially Civilization. They are two different flavors of playing Civ because the tech trees are somewhat different. If you play them combined, then you combine the tech trees.
Nice.
So that's I have signed up for a demo for it, but my Gen Con schedule near the end is really weird. So I may or may not get to play in it. It'll be late on Saturday, very, very late. Like starting early and then running late because it's this, but you get the idea.
Yeah, that can get funky there sometimes.
Yeah. I don't know how my late Saturday is going to work out, so I may end up having to return the ticket, but I'm hoping to play it. And if it's as good as I played Mega Civ once, I played Old Civ several times. If it's actually what it says it is, I'm very excited about it. So that's Western Empires.
Yeah. So up next for me, I'm interested in checking out is we'll try not to butcher the name too bad. Teotihuacan, the late pre-classic period. So this is the expansion to Teo, which was kind of a big hit last year. Was it last year? Yeah, it was only last year.
Yeah, they were demoing at Gen Con last year. It wasn't available for release, but they were demoing it.
Right.
Because my oldest son and I were going to be in the demo of that. We sat down and waited for like 15 minutes. And then we realized that we were going to be, if we actually demoed it, we were going to run afoul of another event and gave up our seats to other people. So I do remember that. And that's why I know it was last year because my son was there. So
yeah. Anyway, this is supposed to be a modular expansion for it. So there's something like 7 to 9 modules, and you can kind of pick and choose which ones you want to add in, vary up the game quite a bit, that kind of thing. I'm interested to check this out. It's not really like it wasn't an insta buy or anything because Teo wasn't for me, but I really enjoyed playing Teo last year. It's one of the few like Euro games that have come out lately that I was like, I really enjoy this. It wasn't anything I think earth-shatteringly new, but it was just it had some interesting meshing of mechanisms that some I've seen, some I haven't, some were a little new. But it was very crunchy, very interesting, and it'll be kind of neat to see what this expansion adds to it. Like I said, probably not one I'm going to be running to pick up, but then again, I know a few people that have Teo in our local group, and I'm sure they will, and I am looking forward to checking it out, though.
I will probably check that out as well. Again, it's not a buy for me, but I will probably stop by and look at it. Okay, so my next one, I'm going to also talk about an expansion because, hey, it's expansion time. Through the Ages, New Leaders and Wonders is going to be there in demo form. It's also supposed to be an Essen release, but it's supposed to be in fully playable form. I have one day where my literal intent is to go to the CGE room when it opens and go straight in there and try to get a demo game in of this. Because that's how I do Gen Con, is go ahead for the 3-hour, 5-hour long games. And so this one it takes all the leaders and wonders in the game, and from what I understand, because like all the information isn't really available yet, is that there has a whole bunch of new leader cards and new wonder cards that are either can be shuffled into the main deck, or they have these like dummy cards you can put into the main deck in appropriate player counts. And then when you get up one of the dummy cards, you just shuffle the appropriate deck of leaders and wonders and draw one out of that. I think you can do it either way. what I had also understood is there's like scenarios in this where it lists good sets of wonders and leaders from the expansion and from the base game mixed up that make for interesting games and things like that. So basically, it just adds another set of cards to add into Through the Ages, and gives it some variety so that you're not playing the exact same game. Again, everybody will know what's in there. It isn't like it's going to be suddenly a surprise and the card flips up. And if it is, it's a surprise to everybody. I just like the fact that it's going to give it a little bit more variety. And it looks to me like it's just a couple of decks of cards, so that shouldn't be a high cost expansion either. Um, I really enjoy Through the Ages. The only reason I don't play it a ton is the game length. However, I played the app to death for a while, and as soon as this hits the app, I'll be doing the in-app purchase to get this and playing the app to death once again. And that's Through the Ages, New Leaders and Wonders.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to check that one out. I've been interested in as well. I think, like you, I'm probably more interested in it being added to the app than I am the physical game as well.
Because it's hard to get the physical game to the table is the only reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's really it. Like, yeah. And the player count can be an issue. Like, I don't hesitate to do a 4-player online asynchronous game, but when, people are like, let's meet for game night and do 4-player Through the Ages, it's like, we could do 18xx. It's probably the same.
And then another thing worth noting, supposedly also in the expansion, there's a slight rebalancing of some of the military cards. I don't know whether it's to make it better or worse, because I don't feel like the military in the new version is unbalanced in any way. So
yeah,
I don't know. They must feel like there's something slightly off, but
yeah. They have enough metrics on this game that usually they make pretty good calls on it.
Yeah, I think they felt like something is slightly off of military, because there's some revised military cards in the game that you're just supposed to put in the base game and old base game ones, and then you're good to go.
Yeah. Nah, it's definitely like a classic game. It's an awesome game. Still probably my favorite Civ game. And yeah, once it's out on the app, I'll be buying that for sure and hitting up people for online games and other things as well. Yeah, but no, that's a good one.
All right, Andy, let's see what game you name that's already on my list this time.
Yeah, probably. QE. Did we get that one?
That's actually was going to be my official episode hype this episode. So that's the reason it's not on my list, but go for it. But count this as my hype for the episode too. So
yeah, well, it'll shorten things down since we started late, right?
Yeah, this whole thing's a hype segment, so let's just skip the hype and do this.
Right? Yeah, because actually the hype I talked about anyway. So
okay, we're good. We'll just skip the
hype. So QE is an auction game, and I actually saw this quite a few years ago, but it was in its unique form, shall we say, where the board was just like a ginormous block of wood and everything was on like balsa wood and whiteboards and stuff. But even then, it kind of had this endearing thing as an auction game, because the interesting thing about it was it stands for quantitative easement, which has something to do with basically printing money. So you play this auction game and there's no set value to anything, and you can bid anything. There's no like you only have $100 to spend. It's like you can bid whatever you want. You should be like, I'm bidding $1 million on this thing. Other than that, it's kind of a set collection scoring mechanism thing. And the catch is, though, whoever ends up spending the most money at the end of the game just outright loses. So it could be really kind of chaotic in its bidding. Like to some extent, it's going to come down to who starts where in the first round or two. Like you could have someone start off with, this tile went for $20, and then all of a sudden it's in the thousands or something like that, if you had some crazy people doing things on it. And but it's not also perfect information, because I forget what the mechanism, but you only see certain bids. You don't know what everyone bids, so you can't even keep track of how much everyone's fully spending. I don't know. It just looks kind of like a crazy auction game. And then, yeah, that fun reveal at the end of who spent it, someone going, I have so many points. Oh, look, you spent more money than me. You lose.
So this is a game that I backed when it was on Kickstarter, and I should have it before Gen Con. And I'm just like utterly enthralled with this. So Andy basically described it pretty well. I'm gonna add a little bit more detail because this kind of explains how cool it is. Okay, so all the game is everybody has their own little dry erase bid board, and then all of the things you're bidding for in the game are also dry erase boards. And the game is actually decided by who. It's like kind of a set collection thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to like get the most of certain sets, and like it's kind of like it's the scoring. I think is kind of like Ponzi scheme, and that like the more you have of a particular type, the more they're worth, in like an escalating fashion. Like 1 is worth 1, 2 is worth 3, that type of thing. I don't know exactly how it works, but that's the gist of it. But what happens is each round, the one of the players is the auctioneer that round. And what they do is they take a tile off the top, and that's the one's up for bid. Everybody else takes their own personal whiteboard and writes a number that they want to bid on it for, and then slides it over to that person. That person then gets to see what everybody is bidding. They get to flip them all up and look at them themselves and not reveal anything. Then they take the one that has the highest actual bid, and they write that on the back of the board, the number that they bid, and gives that back to the person that won it, and then gives all the bid chips back to everybody else. Then that person to their left is the auctioneer. And that's how you're gathering information on what other people are bidding, even though, you get to see some of the bids, but not nearly all of them. When someone else's auctioneer, the only bid you know is your own bid and whether or not it won. When you're the auctioneer, you actually get value by seeing what everybody's bidding for this.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's part of the neat part of the game is that.
Yeah, it's not perfect information.
You have partial information on what everybody's bidding, not full. Mm-hmm. And from what I've seen, this playthrough, I've seen a couple playthroughs of this, and it seems to me what happens is rampant inflation. Like everybody bids small numbers at the beginning, and then over time they're like, I need to start winning some tiles, so they start inflating bids. And then they see the other tiles, like people are really starting to inflate their bids. I better start inflating my bids. And by the end of the game, people are, I'm bidding $5 billion. Yeah. I mean, the level of inflation does depend on the game. But then someone at the end that way overbids, they're going to be the person that just loses because they bid the most.
Yeah, even if they got the most points.
Yeah. So how do you check that? That's the fun of the game. And I'm really excited to get it. It's really it was a pretty inexpensive game. It's mostly just a few dry erase markers and a bunch of little like dry erase tiles. And that's like it. It seems really cool to me. I'm looking forward to playing it.
Yeah, that's definitely one I want to try out. The other thing I kind of like about it is a lot of auction games can come down to calculating how much money everyone has and looking down and knowing you have $1 more than everyone, so you can just shut everyone out. But since in this game you can just literally bid anything at any time, like there's no gaming that. There's no like, oh, they can't afford to bid this much because they can bid whatever the heck they please. So anyway, yeah, this is what I'm looking forward to playing. So what's up next for you, Trent?
Okay. I'm going through my list seeing which ones you haven't talked about. Okay. I want to talk about Cusco. So one of my favorite games the last few years that kind of was like on the quiet side, didn't make a big splash, but I really enjoyed it, was Mexica.
Mexica, I like that one.
Yeah, Mexica's really fun. Mexica's like kind of this weird area control game where you spend half the game defining what the borders of the areas are. And defining those areas where you're sure that you've got more stuff in that area as you're defining it is really part of the game. And it makes it kind of a fun challenge. It's like, are you going to invest time in laying canals to divide the board down? Or are you going to invest time in getting your pieces down and hope the other players, when they're doing the divisions, are forced into choices that benefit you? That's what the whole game is really about. It's kind of a neat game. Cusco is basically in that same series. The graphic design is really similar. This one takes a little bit from it looks like it's more along the lines of like Tikal or Java or one of those area action point systems where you're basically building something on a map, depending on the variation of the game. I've only seen a couple partial playthrough videos of it, but I trust the designers so inherently. Kiesling and Kramer usually make something interesting, so I'm going to go give it a check out. Part of that is because, honestly, I love the component quality and the design in the game of Mexico so much. That's willing to make me go to the booth and at least check this one out. And that's Cuzco, Cuzco.
Nice. I know nothing about this one, so.
Well, it's if you look at the box, you will immediately think Mexico. So that should tell you where it's at.
Yeah, and I've played several of their games before, and they're always like interesting.
Yeah,
if
that's the
nothing
thing.
else.
It's Kiesling and Kramer. I'm willing to look at it. That's
Yep. All right, so I'm gonna throw out. Actually, I only have really one more. I was really looking at Tinny Degree. And this is going to be kind of an oddball one for people who listen to me on the podcast a lot because I don't talk about light games very much. But the expansion for K2 Lotse is supposed to be out. And this is one that I'm actually kind of interested in because K2 has always been for me kind of one of my go-to gateway games to show new people what modern board games can be. And how different they are. And I really like the K2 series because they have some nice card hand management and some life, and they have some of the more modern mechanisms of games. But they're games about mountaineering, and they really do present that theme very, very well. Like, because it just becomes difficult as you go up the mountain and you're checking the weather to see if you're going to die or not. Can you afford to do this or that or whatever? This expansion basically is going to be looking at the Lotse face, which is apparently, from what I read about, one of the most, if not one of the most, it's like in that top tier of, oh my God, this mountain is horrible to climb and has a great chance of killing you. Like getting up and down Everest is like the freaking cakewalk comparatively to making it up and down this mountain. And I know that it seems to reflect that in the gameplay with new weather tiles and stuff. Like it's going to be much more about how far can you get up and maybe get down and not die in the process. Where the base game of K2, it was always just, it was pretty easy or not too terribly hard to get to the top of K2 and down. Like usually someone was going to pull it off unless you got nasty with it and started using the hard side of the board and stuff. I'm really hoping this one kind of makes it like really difficult to make it to the top of that mountain, so that when you have 4 or 5 players playing, it's a whole lot more jockeying for position, and it's not just who can get to the top first. Or what I want to see is a situation where like nobody makes it to the top, so you have to actually figure out scores based on that. So that's K2 Lotse.
cool. I think I played K2 a long time ago, but I really don't remember it all that well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and like I said, it's not something I play a huge amount, but I consider it one of my go-to like new game or gateway games.
okay. Well, then I guess it's just up to me, huh?
Yeah, that was pretty much it for me.
Y'all like checked out. All right. I'm going to mention two games. We'll stick with 2 games here. One of them, I'm surprised it wasn't on Andy's list. It's Watergate, which is being published by...
crap. That's because I forgot about it.
Yeah, it's being published by Capstone Games. And it's basically a similar in many ways to the game that recently came out called The Trials of High Treason. It's a 2-player card-driven game where the 2 sides are basically trying to sway elements on the board to their side, and whoever does the best job effectively wins. This side, Watergate, is basically set during the final years of the Nixon administration. One side basically plays the Nixon administration, and the other side plays the Washington Post. You're basically trying to sway the public enough so that either Nixon has to resign or that Nixon retains his presidency, one or the other. So it's like a back and forth based on like uncovering stuff about the Watergate break-in. It's designed by Matthias Kramer, I believe. Is that the designer? Yes. And I'd really like to see his take on this kind of system. It's 30 to 60 minutes, similar in length to High Treason. High Treason is excellent. If this is anything like High Treason, I'm in. I'm going to definitely stop by the Capstone Games booth and give this one a demo. And like I said, if it's anything like High Treason, I'm going to be a fan. And it certainly sounds a lot like High Treason with a fun theme.
Yeah, no, this one I really do want to play as well. Yeah, it's got that whole back and forth tug of war thing. And what was what I thought was really cool is like the theme and the design of the board because like if you look at the board, it looks like one of those like connective yarn diagrams you see in like thriller movies or like
Yeah.
conspiracy
Theory.
theories.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like in when Nixon like prevents something, it's like a redacted document permanently blocks off that connection. So the game's kind of about like building paths between the evidence and Nixon, and he can like redact documents to block it off and other things. But yeah, it looks really cool. I do really want to try this one out. And I think it's by originally the same Capstone's publishing them, but I believe it was published either in a different country or co-published by the same company that did High Treason. So there should be some kind of cross pollination there.
Yeah, I'm hoping that if there's similarity to High Treason, then I know I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah, and plus, like, maybe if it gets popular, High Treason will, just because I think more people, at least in the United States, are going to be like, "Oh, Nixon, yeah, I know that," rather than this kind of not well known in America dude in Canada. Not that it was a bad game at all, but I think most people don't immediately connect with the theme of High Treason as far as, you know, understanding the history of it. But yeah, now I'm looking forward to this one. It totally forgot about it.
Okay, so another game I want to talk about is one that I know very little about, and this is a first-time designer, but I really want to give it a look. It's a 2-hour-long dice placement game called Crystal Palace. Yeah. The fun thing about this dice placement game is at the start of each of the rounds, players set the values of their own dice. So that sounds like I understand generally what they're going for is like you're going to have a pool of points with which to spend on the values of your dice. I'm sure. I understand from what I've got of it is essentially you're spending victory points to do this. Like there's only really one point in the game, and like you have to spend some of those to set the values of your dice. So if you think you're really close to winning or whatever, you think you got a good lead, you don't need to spend all that much, and ones are fine. But if you need to do something, you need to invest in your die and get a higher number, so you have more likely to get spots and stuff like that. You need a higher number. I think that's kind of interesting. To me, that's a lot better than rolling dice, which is something I often find to be a weakness in dice placement games. I don't like the rolling of it. I like to have more control over what I'm doing, and I think that gives this. Also, everything I've seen about it is like every time I read about it, I'm like, I kind of understand what's going on, but then I kind of don't. And that's the kind of thing that like intrigues me. I want to see how this all works. Like I said, this is a first-time designer. They're apparently demoing it there. I'm not sure whether they're selling copies. I don't think so, but I'm not 100% sure. But I'm going to go definitely give it a demo. It looks like the type of thing that's up my alley. It looks definitely heavy in Euro, very decision-heavy Euro, low randomness Euro, which if you're getting the kind of Euros I like, that's where you're at.
Nice.
And that's really all I have to talk about.
Nice. Yeah, like I said, just kind of I think the one takeaway for Gen Con this year, just looking at kind of the ones I talked about and the ones you talked about, is just there's a whole lot more, you know, medium to heavy Euro game kind of stuff going on at this Gen Con than I've seen in previous years.
Dare I say it, Gen Con's getting heavier.
Oh no. We're just bitter. It's not like if you're into the American style board games or RPGs, you're going to be hurting for something new.
It's just the heavier games are getting a bigger representation. I thought that too when I was looking at this. Most years when I go to Gen Con, the games that there's maybe one or two heavy ones I'm interested in. A lot of times it's like LCG type stuff. But this year there's actually a number of heavier games I'm genuinely interested in. So
yeah. So say I don't get to go to a lot of conventions, but we almost always do like a, you know, what are you looking forward to at Gen Con kind of show. And almost every year we do that. I'm like, yeah, I got like one or two things to talk about. And then I'll basically be sitting there doing nothing the rest of the podcast. But this year there was actually quite a few. So yeah, like we said, we're going to kind of go ahead and skip the hype segment since each of us kind of really already talked about our hype. So if you're going to Gen Con, have a great time. Share photos with us on Twitter, let us see things, all of that. Hope everyone has a great time there. So if you're wanting to get in contact with us, you can join us on our guild, The Good, The Bored, and The Ugly, BGG Guild 2173. You can tweet at Ugly, or at Gaming Trent if you want to get Trent, or me at Dennison Science. Please also visit the Facebook page, The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. Trent, any final thoughts? Are we good?
No, like I said, I'm going to go to Gen Con this year. I'm going to try as best I can with the sometimes low quality internet availability at Gen Con to cover it somewhat, especially on Twitter. I'll be posting pictures of different things and things like that. Afterwards, I don't really think we're going to do a Gen Con recap episode, but I will definitely be dropping thoughts on games for the next several episodes after Gen Con.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. Did you get a cool hotel attached to the convention center this year?
Absolutely. I am in the hotel that is closest to the dealer hall.
Oh, nice.
Like,
yeah. So you can do that whole stay late and go crash thing without getting an Uber.
Yep. And if I buy something at the dealer hall and don't want to carry it, I'm literally in my room in less than 5 minutes.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good night, everyone. And we will see you next time on The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly.